Just got off of an hour-long conversation on a show called Sunny in Seattle with a guest who really dove deep into my story and understands the importance of storytelling. And we scheduled it to where I was on her show, the radio show Sunny in Seattle, and now she's on my show. Her name is Sunny Joy McMillan. And we have a lot to talk about in 24 minutes, so I'm just going to bring her on right now. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
I know we will have spent 90 minutes together by the time this is done. And that's if we just hang up right when this is done and don't continue having conversation. So your website is goldenoversold.com. I want to let people know that right away and just welcome you to the show. And we met each other through someone else. And here we are having this conversation. You were kind enough to have me on your show this morning, and now we scheduled it for us to talk right afterwards. So welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So first of all, I want to, you're a best-selling Amazon author, you're a show host, you have all these accolades. You're also an attorney who isn't practicing. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about, first and foremost, just to set the tone of who you are, is you call yourself a recovering attorney because you no longer practice. So can you explain to us what that is?
Yeah. So what I usually tell people is I went to law school, I wouldn't say for all the wrong reasons, but I like to be very upfront about it. And it really was a self-worth issue. I thought that if I got a graduate degree, that it would prove that I was smart enough to be in the same room with, other people and have intelligent conversations, because I didn't feel very secure in my own intelligence or worth and value. And so I thought having a certificate from a law school that says that I qualified would be it. And so I did all the things. I went to law school and took the bar and practiced with, that funnel that they send young associates through for the summer programs. And then you become an attorney with stars in your eyes and you think it's going to be a certain way. And then you're just at your desk billing 2,000 hours a year. But I practiced for several years at a big civil defense firm. And I knew going in that it was not my calling, but I was kind of like square peg, round hole. I was going to make it fit because it was respectable and it pleased my parents and didn't disappoint anybody. And so doing that made me realize very quickly, even I knew it wasn't my calling, but it also wasn't something that I could continue on with for any long stretch. So the three other members of my entering class at my law firm are now, either general counsel or partners at the firm. And I went on a completely different track and just realized there's a point when you can't ignore the still small voice inside that says, this is not where you're meant to be. This is not your right life. This is not your right work. I wanted work that felt like a calling. I didn't want a career. I wanted to follow a calling. And so that led me to where I am today. So I like to say recovering attorney because in the work that I now do, I'm a coach, and I have primarily for the last several years assisted women who are deciding whether to stay or go in an unhappy marriage. And we either work to heal things or I help them navigate going through divorce gracefully, because that was my own personal experience. So primarily I've helped women do that. And in my industry, coaching, I think I like to bring my professional work that I did before into the equation so that there's an element of, I think, trust and credibility and at least the experience. While I wasn't a family law attorney, I did enough to be dangerous. So at least I had some of that in my background that could help women navigate that particular transition for those that it's appropriate for.
I think just like a little bit like marriage, when you are an attorney and all the education and probably money that you invested in your career, making the decision to walk away from that in any capacity, you have to be okay with it because, like you said, so many of your colleagues or your former colleagues have now reached that pinnacle of success in that career. Mm-hmm. And you have to be okay with seeing that happen and not have any doubt about your decision and know that that was their path, but it's not yours and you're okay with it.
Yeah. And again, knowing that I have it was very important to me to have a perfect life on paper. And I thought that could be a kind of armor that would make me feel better. And it ended up, it was an empty armor on the outside, not a fullness inside of me. And so to find the fullness inside of me, I knew I had to go to the root issue. And it ended up meaning I left my marriage. I left my home state of Texas. I left the practice of law. I left a lot behind. And you're right. While I've watched them hit those markers and my friends, do all the things that we're supposed to be doing at these 30, 40, 50 years old, I am on a completely different path. I'm actually in the process of applying to divinity school right now, strangely enough. December, about 19 or 20 years ago, I was applying to law school, and here I am 20 years later applying to go to divinity school, which that's the calling that I'm now focused on. So
I spoke with a group of young students yesterday on a Zoom for something I was a guest on, participating as a guest, and they asked, what is your advice to these young people? And one of the things I said is, be okay with taking that fork in the road. When I was growing up, all I wanted to be was an author. I wanted to write books, and then eventually I thought, oh, I want to write greeting cards. I wrote a letter to the president of Hallmark when I was graduating high school to find out how to get a job with them one day. I still have the letter. And so all of these things but life happened to me so young, and I kept trying to go back to college. Then I got sick and go back to college, and everything kept happening. And the advice I was giving is, be okay with setting that goal.
yeah.
But don't miss the forks in the road that might enhance the goal once you get to that place, if it feels right. But also having the flexibility to understand that all the lessons along the way might be much more rich than what you originally planned for yourself. Hopefully it becomes even bigger than what you could have planned for yourself.
Yeah. And you know what I found, it's kind of like that quote that Steve Jobs is, I think, very famous for, that he gave at a commencement speech. And it was about not being able to connect the dots looking forward. You can only do it when you look backward. And while I'm not practicing law, I would not trade the experience. Like, I'm not the most assertive person. And not only did law school teach me to think critically, but it also gave me a certain amount of confidence in my interactions. And I know that what I do now with divinity school, assuming that happens, and how I've used it in my coaching, everything that I have done has led to this point. And if you follow the still small voice versus what culture expects, you will find that all of the dots will connect. You will be guided. At least that's been my experience, and the people that I have either followed or worked with and all of that. So yeah, I'm with you. I highly recommend being very conscious of those forks in the road and following your own heart and soul, not what culture expects.
And had you not disliked being an attorney so much, say that you'd have gone down a different path that you were okay with, you might not have made the change. You had to dislike it so much that every day it was like this red blinking, light in your eyes saying, make a different choice, make a change. Because sometimes I think mediocrity gets in our way too. We get complacent, we get okay with whatever it is, and then we settle into that, as opposed to being so uncomfortable like you were that you had to make the change. And some people in life right now are uncomfortable for the first time ever and don't really know what to do with that discomfort. Some of us prevail and some of us don't.
Yeah, I know. One of the best pieces of advice that I received when I was starting my coaching practice was, get really comfortable with being uncomfortable. And the more uncomfortable I have encouraged myself to become, the greater risks that I take and the more rewards that I see in my life. So I highly recommend taking
comfortable. Well, let's take a quick break. I want to talk about your book, Unhitched, and your work in supporting people who are in that transition, either to make good and make it work, or to let it go. So let's take a break. We're talking with Sunny Joy McMillan. And if you want to check out her radio show, it is called Sunny in Seattle. Sunny in Seattle. And we'll have all the links down below as you watch the show so that you'll know where to find her. We'll be back in just a moment. We're back. We're talking with Sunny Joy McMillan. She hosts a show called Sunny in Seattle. I highly recommend you taking a listen. She's also the author of a book called Unhitched. We've been talking about her big decision to leave her career as an attorney about 20 years ago, but yet how working as an attorney helps connect the dots to the life she's living now. So thanks again for being here. Let's dive in and talk about your book, Unhitched. And the subtitle, I'm going to read it so I don't say it wrong. Unlock your courage and clarity to unstick your marriage. Tell us what that title alone means.
Well, a lot of people, when they hear unhitched, obviously it's a play on getting hitched, traditional phrase for marriage. So many people think, oh, well, it must mean she wants to encourage us to get divorced. And that is not it at all. It's really about unhitching from anything that does not serve us. And that could be a relationship. One of the best testimonials I received from someone that I worked with who also had read my book was that my book helped her stay married until it was time to go. And then it helped her get divorced gracefully. So I just like to state at the outset, I believe a marriage can be a soul adventure, even if it doesn't last forever. Some people are meant to stay together forever. Others are not. I don't think there is one size fits all answer. And I wanted to write a book that talked about, it's part memoir, part self-help manual. And I had a pretty high conflict marriage to another attorney who was a gifted trial attorney. But we were like kerosene and fire from day one. And so it was a very high conflict marriage. It was not a good or bad marriage. It was just a hard marriage from day one. And to go from that level of contentiousness and conflict to the most beautiful post-divorce friendship. And then my ex-husband passed away in 2018. So when I speak in past tense, that's why. But we had this beautiful post-divorce friendship. I thought if it could happen for us, it could happen for anyone. And here's how I did it. So I wanted to share that, not only share our story, but share what other people could do to either heal what was unhappy or dysfunctional in a marriage, or to walk away gracefully and do it without leaving, nuclear warfare in your wake. And it was also important to me because I was raised within a community that really from the time I was little, the only outs in a marriage were if your spouse was an adulterer, an addict, or an abuser. And even then you try as hard as you can. And sometimes you overlook things. And that was not the case in our marriage. And I feel like we're at a time when we do have, thank goodness, the freedom and the permission that even if something is not horribly, horribly dysfunctional and wrong, it's still okay if you recognize that your soul's paths need to diverge at some point in the lifetime. And so I wanted to give voice to that, to give women permission to really go deep. It's kind of like when you talk about the don't wait stories. There's so many things that would not have happened in my life had I not walked away from that marriage. And
let me ask you this then. So you talked earlier in the first segment about connecting those dots and how you don't regret, becoming an attorney and all of the commitment it involved. Do you, and I'm not talking from a place of regret, but do you feel like you perhaps should have never married each other and just been friends from the start, and then you had to kind of undo what you did, unhitch it, I guess, by marrying each other? Or do you still walk away from that saying, and not from a place of regret, everything lines up to where we are today, but was getting married the mistake? Or what I guess what I'm trying to say is I remarried briefly after Wesley died, and I made a really big decision, even though it was a very brief marriage, that I was going to spend the rest of my life teaching Hunter how to live and reverse a mistake, than try to spend your whole life fixing this mistake. So what was it for you, you think? Do you wish should you have stayed friends, or are you glad you had the marriage and learned from that experience?
Lisa, this is
a question. Really long question.
No, I know exactly.
Way of framing the question, but that's what I'm trying to get at.
No, it's such a good question. And it is one that I have been sitting with for a long, long time. So I'll say this as a preface. I have interviewed on my show a lot of near-death experience survivors, and as well as people, my show deals a lot with spirituality and the divine and the where science and spirituality come together. And I have just heard story after story that we cannot make a mistake. Like everything that happens here while we are on earth is a learning experience. You can't get it wrong. You can't make a mistake. And I know this is going to be like if we had time, we could go into, I hate to just make that blanket statement and leave it there because people are like, but what about this? And what about this? But I'll just say as a general matter, I do believe that there is a divine tapestry behind the scenes. So when I look back at my marriage, I think we could have gone either way. It's kind of like a parallel universe thing. Like it was the choose your own adventure. I don't know if I would be where I am without having had that marriage. I do not consider it a mistake. I will say that Rob, my ex-husband, before his passing, he was not in favor of the divorce. And so I imagine he would answer the question very differently than me. But I believe it was a soul growth learning experience that transformed each of us, and it wouldn't have happened otherwise. So yeah, there were definitely red flags, and that still small voice inside of me said, this is, like, it was screaming, no. There were red flags. I know Rob saw his own, yet we were like strong-headed attorneys, and we were just going to keep beating our head against the wall and making it work. So if I had listened to that still small voice, I probably would not have walked down the aisle, but we both pushed through it and came out the other side transformed in ways that couldn't have happened otherwise. So can it be a both answer, Lisa? That's where I've
I think it absolutely can.
Yeah.
I think I learned so much from that experience. And when I say, wanting my son Hunter to learn the lesson of how do you gracefully navigate when you've made a mistake or you've taken a wrong path, that you got to correct it and you got to move forward. Instead of, my exact words were, I wasn't going to waste my Hunter's childhood on this mistake I'd made in the course of his childhood.
I love how you wrote about that, by the way. I mean, you just articulated that so beautifully.
Oh, that's true. You read the book last night. Thank you for that. So let's take a break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about what you offer to the people who you're coaching. And then just a brief touch on a term that I read on your blog. You say it because I'll mess it up.
Presentist.
It's about being present. I think it lines up with the whole idea of not waiting to live your life, but also being grateful for the moment that we're in. So let's take a break. We're talking with Sunny Joy McMillan. She hosts a show called Sunny in Seattle. She's the author of a book called Unhitched, and we'll be talking with her when we come back in the next break. Hi, we're back. I'm talking with Sunny Joy McMillan. You can listen to her radio show, Sunny in Seattle. I love the name of that. And also her website is goldenoversoul.com. Her book is Unhitched. You can find all of that at her website. Thanks again for being here. So we've covered a lot. We talked about your work and how you help people, you coach people, particularly women who are trying to decide about marriage and staying in the marriage, working harder at the marriage. You're not just saying everyone who's unhappy should get divorced. Sometimes we dig in and we make it work and we stay, and that's the right answer too. So everyone's different. So tell us from the approach of how you combine your book Unhitched to your calling as a coach. What is your biggest takeaway, and what would you say your clients, some of their biggest takeaways in terms of being okay with getting a divorce or knowing it when it's time to work harder and stay?
Yeah. I think while Unhitched will always be, I feel so proud of that work, and my ex-husband was still alive at the time that it was going to publication, and he gave it his blessing, and I feel proud to have been able to put that in a box. And one of my therapists back when we were going through the divorce said, it's kind of like putting it in a box and putting a bow on it, and you can put it on the shelf knowing that everything is as healed and resolved as it can be. But where my work, to answer your question, long story long, I feel like my own journey that took me away from law, that took me away from the marriage, that moved me where I am now, was about learning to follow my own inner wisdom, my own intuition, that spirit, that heart, that soul that I think we all have as a guidance system inside of us. And so one way that can manifest is following your heart and your spirit and knowing whether to leave a marriage or not. But in a broader, framework or structure for my work, it's really, and this is why I'm applying to go to divinity school, because clearly I talk a lot about spirit, soul, divine, everything. Like, that's where my true passion is. So a lot of the women that I have worked with are going through some type of a spiritual awakening of sorts. And so sometimes that means things shift in their relationship. So I started noticing that trend. And so the work that I really now do is about helping people tune into that inner wisdom and that inner guidance. I think for so long we have looked to authority figures or culture or other people to tell us what we should be doing. And I believe we all have the blueprint for our highest and best destiny inside of us. And it's just a matter of peeling back the layers to get to it. And so that brings me the greatest joy, because I believe that at our heart, we are these dearly loved spiritual beings having the human experience, just like Pierre Teilhard de Chardin said. And so to be able to connect with that power, that courage, that peace, that knowing, like life becomes, even in 2020, life becomes not just survivable, but thrivable.
Or especially.
Yeah. Yes, well said.
Yeah. So let's talk about the term
presentist.
I want to say presentist, but it's presentist. And it's the idea of being present. And we just have like 4 minutes left. So let's talk about that concept and what you've gleaned from trying to live in the present.
Yes. So I cannot take credit for that word. I interviewed Ervin Laszlo, who is this delightful Italian scientist who does studies kind of that intersection between quantum science and spirituality. And I asked him, because I had heard he was called a futurist, and I wanted to ask him a question about that. And he said, well, I actually don't like the term futurist. I consider myself a presentist. And I thought, oh, that's amazing. Because when we are present, not future tripping into worrying about things going to happen or may not happen, not looking backward and ruminating and regretting, but when you are in the present moment, you are aligned with the energy that can guide you to where you most need to go. So by being present and living in perpetual creative response to what is present, that is how we are guided to follow those breadcrumbs and connect those dots. It's only by being present that we can follow those dots to the highest and best destiny, or at least that's my opinion.
And how do you apply that to your own life? Like, what's an example of how you live that? People ask me a lot, what is the Don't Wait Project? And do I have to have a project? And I said, no, for us, sometimes in our house, it's just an attitude we have when we start our day. And it doesn't happen every day. That's for sure. I try to live with it every day with that kind of don't wait mindset. Mm-hmm. And what is an example of how you live as a presentist?
Yeah, well, the only way that I know how to do that is through my practice. And some people might call it a spiritual practice, a morning practice. That is the place where I know I have supported my body so that it's a conducive environment for my spirit to give me those signs and that wisdom, where I have cleaned out the mind clutter and I have my tools where I have like a nice clean slate in my head. And then I am connecting my spirit. And that for me is being out in nature and listening to inspiring sources. And when I combine that little recipe together in my practice, that I don't do 7 days a week for a rigid amount of time, I do it a regular amount throughout the week. And those touch points that energize, kind of like putting your phone on the charger, that's how I do it. I stay present through my practice. And I highly recommend to practice however that looks for you. Not you necessarily, Lisa, but anyone out there listening.
Right. Well, and I can tell you that I could benefit from just even the structure of that practice. Yeah. The structure of that consistency, because sometimes we have a schedule maybe, or just some place that we have to be, or something we know needs doing. That's one thing, but to actually have a practice and how we navigate those things that we need to do that are on our agenda, that either are really mundane, icky, boring, not fun things, or the things that lead us to the purpose that we want to live. So thank you so much for sharing your story and for being on the show. I feel like we could take another half an hour, but like I said, at this point, we've visited for 90 minutes because I was on your show before this. The show is called Sunny in Seattle. We're talking with Sunny Joy McMillan. The website is Golden Oversoul, as in SOUL.com. And again, just thank you for being here. The book is Unhitched. People can pick that up. It's an Amazon bestseller. Good for you. That's not an easy achievement.
People know how to work algorithms these days, so.
Yeah. Well, it worked. Well, thanks again for being here. If you want to listen to Sunny Joy's show, it's Sunny in Seattle. I highly recommend it. And have a lovely rest of your day. We're going to chat when we hang up here. It won't be recorded, but I look forward to it.
Me too. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share.
Do you want to become part of the most dependable brand of vehicles today? Then start looking at Town Toyota. Come drive the best-selling, totally redesigned 2019 RAV4. Come check out the powerful towing performance of the Tundra. It's built for the worksite and the weekend. Forge your own path and seek tougher roads in the Tacoma. Leave no trail left unchallenged. Whatever your vehicle needs, Toyota has a seat for you. Come visit us today.